Coming up next on Words and Numbers, aliens.
A question for audiophiles.
$40 a pack cigarettes.
And who's really allowed to vote for president?
All this and more coming up next on Words and Numbers, a Civil original production. Check us out at civil.com. That's civl.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
James, I know you're a musician and very heavily into music, listening, producing the whole thing. Do you?
I am.
You have a number of guitars, and they're all electric, is that right? Or a number of them are electric?
Yeah, almost all.
Can you tell the difference? Because I know companies advertise their special high-quality copper wire sheathing, whatever. Can you tell a difference between the high-quality, low-quality cabling?
In a nanosecond. Well, all right.
Well, see, I figured you...
There are different, without getting too far into the weeds here, there are different uses for copper wire in the making of music. One of those uses is spooling around a magnet, which makes a pickup, which gets the sound from the strings to the amp. And I can tell. If you're using lousy copper or adulterated copper, I'll know in a heartbeat. Now, cables, on the other hand, cables, that thing that goes from your guitar to the amp, not nearly as much. Not near.
Okay.
And audiophiles for years have been trying to sell people extra special speaker cables that cost them like $1 million a foot.
Right.
Because you can hear the difference. No, you can't. But
yeah,
I vented my spleen. Say what you need.
No, I know that. I figured that in part because our producer, Danny, when trying to track down an errant noise, had me buy some super duper wire that connected my computer to something else, and it didn't do anything. And the problem is my air conditioner was running. But this article comes from a website that I have used for decades. I love this site, Tom's Hardware. He talks about basically computer stuff. He ranges into other electronic things as well. But it's just a quality site. Anytime I want to know, all right, what's the final word on something to do with computers, I can go to his place, Tom's Hardware. But I ran across this article from Tom's Hardware. In a blind test, audiophiles couldn't tell the difference between audio signals sent through copper wire, a banana, or wet mud.
All right, I find that a little hard to believe.
Well, this was specifically the cabling that you were describing. That apparently they stuck it literally. I've got a picture of two ends of cables, with the ends off, stuck into a banana. And they
I didn't realize a banana
mud as well. They ran a test and discovered that no, indeed, there's no big difference.
Yeah, people pay a lot of money for speaker cable. I just log on to Amazon, buy the industrial strength kind that doesn't break easily, and strew it about the room. I don't worry about speaker cable at all. I concern myself with other things, right? The speakers are really important. The receiver or the amplifier is really important. But, I listened once. I went with our friend Phil Magnus to a store, very little specialized shop. And the guy inside asked me what my favorite album of all time is. And for those of you who care about such things, there are two. It's Clutching at Straws and Brave, both by Marillion. And I asked for Clutching at Straws. And I listened to it on a stereo that literally cost $250,000. I've owned houses that didn't cost that much. And it sounded great. And the guy said, are you interested? And I said, no, you idiot, I'm not interested. I have $250,000. And I said, and even if I were, I would have to tell you, frankly, that this sounds great. And I mean great. But the delta between this and the system that I have at my house that cost $2,000, maybe all in, is not that big. It's not worth the extra $247,000, right? How could it be? Now, and he said, all due credit to him, he said, look, I'm dealing with people who have more money than they know what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And they choose to have me come and install these things in their homes. But I get it. The difference isn't that great. Because how
it's
could
interesting.
it be?
You say that because I've had that experience, that kind of experience twice. Of course, I'm not into audio things like you are, but once with a bottle of wine and once with a bottle of scotch. And in both cases, it was over $1,000 bottle of wine, $1,000 bottle of scotch. I didn't know it at the time, but it was markedly, each of them, markedly better than any wine or any scotch I'd ever had before. Clearly, hands down, no question. However, that extra delta is not worth the extra $800, $900 in price.
And again, how could it be? Right. I mean,
right.
We
yes.
We live in a world that is constrained. We have all kinds of constraints. If money were no object, I would buy the best of everything and I wouldn't think twice about it. But money's always an object. Nothing you can do about that. But I want to talk about something that's way more fun than this. And I don't think matter of fact, I know I've never said this before. This is a sentence I have never uttered. Barack Obama has done a wonderful thing.
What's
not
he done?
Even curious? You're not even curious?
Oh, I am curious. What's he done? I mean, in retrospect, I was not at all happy when he was elected, but it's one of those things, I think we do that with many presidents. We look back and say, oh boy, if only we had him now. And I think what's actually happening is we're looking back to the era and seeing it through rose-colored glasses, and what we want is to go back to that. But nonetheless, what's he done?
Obama was a jerk, and he was an especially incredible jerk in his second term. But on a podcast with the article I'm dealing with is from the New York Post, who credits Brian Tyler Cowen.
Oh yeah.
So is that Tyler Cowen that we know?
Yeah.
I have no idea, but why does everybody call him Tyler if his name is Brian Tyler Cowen?
Oh, he just goes by his middle name, I guess.
Well, we gotta go talk to him, because on his podcast, Barack Obama said that aliens are in fact real.
Are what?
Former president of the United States.
They are in fact what?
Real. They exist. They're a thing. It's not a question.
Did he expound? Is this knowledge he has gained from being president, or his personal experience?
Knowledge he's gained from being president. They're real, he said, but I haven't seen them. So he's been briefed on them. He's talked with his people about them, but he's never laid eyes on them. No follow-up question. And here's where Tyler
follow-up.
No, Tyler Cowen needs to get yelled at, because no follow-up questions on the topic were asked.
Whoa. Yeah, I've got all kinds of questions.
Yeah, me too.
First amongst them, if I were president and found out through official channels somehow that aliens existed, I would demand to see one.
Well, maybe we don't have one to show him. I don't know.
All right. So maybe they've
come, they've said hello, they've left. They've come, they've crashed, they died. Millions of possibilities out there. But look, we have a former president of the United States looking someone straight in the eye and saying, yes, aliens are real. Now, are there lots more questions? Yes. I would love to ask them. And we should get old Barry Hussein Obama here on the podcast. He's not coming because we would ask actual questions that he wouldn't want to answer.
Well, now hang on. I have a question. Is it the case that Tyler, because I can't imagine Tyler letting that go. Did Tyler really not ask, or was it excised later?
I'm reading an article from the New York Post, not watching the podcast or listening. I'm going to go track that podcast down so I could find out, what the hell.
I'm Anthony Davies, co-host of Words and Numbers. James Harrigan and I are proud to be on Civil's network because we believe in their unifying principle of human respect, which is the idea that our well-being as humans is diminished when we employ coercion, and that conversely, our happiness and prosperity are maximized when we cooperate. If you agree, please join us at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
And Ant, that's not even close to the foolishness of the week. Can you believe it? Can you believe it?
Yeah, missing the opportunity to ask about aliens to a former president. Yeah, that's high
really
on my list of foolishness of the week.
But for the real foolishness, we're back to our good friends in Australia. And I don't know how they do it, because I really kind of wanted to move to Australia as my last home. I thought maybe it'd be lovely to wind out my final years in Australia. And now I think that might be a phenomenally stupid idea, because every time I hear anything about Australia, it's about the government being a bunch of hacks. I don't know what the hell is wrong with these people. I did volunteer to become the arbiter of what is and is not hate speech online. There's apparently one person who does that job, or one person in charge of all the people who did that job, and she's an American. So if they want an American to go down there and tell them what hate speech is, I'll do it. Matter of fact, I can do it from here. There's no such thing. There, we're done. But I digress. I want to talk, Ant, about the series of tax hikes. There have been 8 tax hikes in 10 years that were put in place to reduce the rate of smoking. And that has, in fact, happened. And a carton of cigarettes now in Australia costs 55 Australian dollars, which is $40 American.
$40 for a pack of cigarettes.
For a single pack, that's $4 a cigarette.
Wow.
Okay, economist, what do you figure has happened?
I'm sorry, I'm still reeling from the $4. That's like, those are reasonable cigar prices at that point.
Yeah, you could buy, if you know how to do it, you could buy a very good cigar for $4. Anyway, economist, what happened now? What's just happened?
Oh, well, there's got to be a black market run rampant in cigarettes down there. Thriving black market that apparently people can't even come close to getting a handle on. It's called a multi-billion-dollar industry that accounts for as much as half of all tobacco sales in the country, and as much as half. Let me underline that a bit. That is, the tax is so egregious that it is likely that the profit to be made in the black market is so high that the black marketeers themselves would lobby to keep those taxes in place.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, that's exactly right. This is the bootleggers and Baptists problem all over again. We should have somebody on to talk about that. We never really have. It's a good book. You should go look into it. You should look it up online, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a perfect example. The nannies of the nanny state decided it would be best if nobody smoked. So they kept ratcheting up the tax, and they did it so much that the tax is now egregious. A pack of cigarettes, $40. That other people, and the other people are bringing these cigarettes in from Africa and the Middle East, where they're much cheaper. And to give you an idea of how much, when I was in the Middle East, 2010, 2011, so these are older prices, a carton of smokes cost me $14. When I came home for Christmas, that same carton cost $68.50 in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
That was the difference. So you can get nearly free cigarettes in certain parts of the world. And enterprising entrepreneurs go and gobble up all those cigarettes, sensing an arbitrage opportunity, and they move it to some other place, and they get people not to pay 55 Australian dollars, but maybe 25, which is still ridiculous.
And I mean, think about this. This is a country that is the size of, actually, I just saw this recently. It is literally the size of Pluto. It's the size of a former planet.
Yeah, it's almost
Its border,
It's almost
its
as big
border
as the
is
US.
100% water. How do you keep the cigarettes out?
I don't know, but man, I got to tell you, I really want to get into the cigarette business right now.
Right.
I mean, no, I'm not kidding. I think it's everybody's right to smoke whatever the hell they want to smoke. And if I can undercut the competition, which the competition is being extorted by the Australian government, hey, good for me.
In herein lies an interesting tale of the unintended consequence of making things illegal, because under normal circumstances, if you wanted to go in and compete, you go in and compete. Now, in this instance, you go in and try and compete and you wind up dead. Because why? They're going to use force to keep you out. And how can they do that? Because they're already operating in an illegal space. There is no government protection for you if you go in and attempt to compete with them. And that's the unintended consequence of making these things so expensive that in effect you've made them illegal.
And then there's no peaceful adjudication when the people who rush to market start killing each other, and they will.
Yes.
Look
and
at
then
illegal drug market and look for the bodies. You'll find them every time.
And people will throw up their hands saying, why do we have such a violence problem surrounding cigarettes? Politicians, what can you do about this? When it's actually the politicians' fault in the first place.
Well, the politician's answer is, well, let's make them a little more expensive.
Right, yeah.
That's always their answer. Anyway, this foolishness of the week really, really angered me as a former cigarette smoker. And, one of my New Year's resolutions, Aunt, was to start smoking again. So we'll see. We'll see.
Really?
Why the hell not?
This week's episode came about because I was, as I do maybe once or twice a week, I go through our comments on YouTube and respond to things that require responding to. And somebody posted some statement about the fact that you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote, and somebody else said, no, it's not in the Constitution. I thought, well, that's weird. I went to ChatGPT and said, show me where in the Constitution it says you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote, expecting it to say, well, Article 3, Section 4, whatever it is. And ChatGPT says, well, there is no place in the Constitution that says you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. So I start digging into that. And,
that is correct.
And I end up in this weird space where I just texted you and said, hey, could we do an episode on this? Because I don't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Who decides who's allowed to vote?
Well, let me start for the reason who decides. Right now, the answer is still the states. I suspect that's not going to be the answer for a whole lot longer. But as of this moment in time, the states. And the reason why that's the answer is because that's what the men at the Constitutional Convention decided, right? And they decided this.
Each state makes its own decision for who can vote.
Yeah, and look, there was a problem that they faced. How is it that people get elected to things, to offices? And the only thing that they really cared about, to any degree, was the House of Representatives, right? Because remember, at the time the Constitution was on the table, up for ratification, a lot of people thought it was going to become a cumbersome thing that would violate their rights. So everything was done that could have been done to remove anything from it that would look like that. And one of the things that would look like that would be telling the states they couldn't run their elections anymore. I mean, imagine you're trying to decide whether you want this new Constitution or not. You consider yourself a Virginian before an American, right, as members of the states did at the time. What are you going to have a knee-jerk reaction to? And one of the things is federalization of voting. So they didn't do it. And there were other reasons besides. Slavery lurks below the surface here, right? And we can get into that at some point, probably not today, but at some point. But the standard they came up with was, if you can vote for the lower house in your state, then you can vote for the House of Representatives in the federal government.
All right. So whatever the state says, if the state says you're eligible to vote for the state house, then you're eligible to vote for and the state presumably could say anybody within the confines of the state, citizen, non-citizen, doesn't matter?
Could have. The states, the long and short of it is that the states had different standards. And we know a bunch of them just off the top of our head, right? We know that women weren't voting, except they were in New Jersey, right? Does that mean they should vote for the House of Representatives federally? Well, in the New Jersey vote, yes. Blacks weren't voting, but yeah, free blacks in the North were voting in, I think, at least 3 states at the time. So what does this mean? Well, what age do you have to be? Different answers, different places. Here's the big one. Do you have to hold property or not? And there is a perfectly good reason to have only property holders voting, because non-property holders in mass can vote to take away the property of other people. You can see where that leads. They will eventually take it all. So there are all kinds of good reasons to restrict the vote. Are we going to let the feeble-minded vote? We do right now in places. I've seen it happen. So I'll tell it in the story after the episode. All these questions are on the table in 1787, and the only politically appropriate answer is whatever you guys are doing in the states, you just keep right on doing it, and that's how we'll decide who's in the House of Representatives. And the state legislatures decided who the senator was going to be.
That's right.
So
at the time, people didn't vote for the senators, right?
So that's no big deal. The only federal office there is the president and the vice president. And the various states got to decide who they wanted to have vote. And if they decided that non-citizens could vote for the president and vice president, they're within their rights to do so. I believe it's fair to say that not one state is doing that now.
Okay, but let me pause there for a second, because the people weren't and still aren't voting for the president. They're technically voting for the electors, the Electoral College.
Let's keep this as simple as we can.
Well, but I could see the federal government making a rule saying you could only elect the president, for example, if you're a U.S. citizen, but that would have to apply to the Electoral College by definition, because the people don't vote for the president.
Well, yeah. And I don't think that makes a hill of beans worth the difference. But here's the thing. The United States Congress could have at any time made the law different. Right? The Constitution specifies, let me get the exact language. Article 1, Section 4. We're always in Article 1, Section 8. But Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 says, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. Semicolon. Listen to this next part, though. The same clause. But the Congress may, at any time by law, make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators.
What I just took from what you said is that, for example, the president's push now to have, voter ID, for example, that's outside of his purview. This would have to be an act of Congress.
Careful. Yes, no, right, all these things. We've got President Trump going on, and I'm going to out myself here because I think it matters. I have always, and I mean always, been in favor of an ID to vote. I think we should be. Do I think there's a lot of voting malfeasance in this country? I absolutely don't. And I say as much every time somebody starts with that nonsense. That election was stolen. Trust me, it wasn't. 300,000 votes in this state. Nope, not a chance. The empirical research on this is so clear that the only people who are convinced of this problem have never done empirical research on this problem, meaning to say they've retweeted things. But nonetheless, I think as a matter of course, we should identify ourselves as we vote, because the vote in a representative republic is sacrosanct. It's the end of the line. It's what determines everything. And look, if we have the technology and we can laminate paper things, so we do, and that technology is available to all, and it is. I mean, I hear all these kind of Karen-type white women saying things like, it's racist, black people can't get these IDs. And then I see black people saying, but do you think we're too stupid to go to the DMV and get a license? It's the soft bigotry of low expectations, and it's disgusting. Now, are some people going to be put out a little bit by this? Yes, but how do they do anything in present-day America without an ID? I can't do a goddamn thing without yanking my ID out of my wallet. So everybody needs to shut up about that. This was a Trump thing. Trump pushes this because he's also pushing the 2020 election nonsense, right, where it was stolen from me. Well, let's separate cause and effect here, because the cause is idiotic, but the effect would be perfectly fine. There is, I think, no problem at all having a national ID. Now, or a series of state IDs that would be acceptable.
Sure.
So now the United States Congress does, in fact, get involved. And they come up with this thing called the SAVE Act, which all the Democrats are presently telling American women, married American women who changed their last names, that now they won't be allowed to vote because their name doesn't match their birth certificate. Oh, for crying out loud, will you shut up? That's, if that ever happens, I will eat both of my shoes. So they come up with this idea, the SAVE Act, which is going to require an ID. And wrapped into the SAVE Act is the necessity of being a citizen to cast a vote in a federal election. And by federal election here, we mean House, Senate, President. I have no problem with this. Is there a problem that only American citizens would vote for federal offices? I think only citizens should vote for all offices. But, you know, if Milwaukee wants people that don't live in Milwaukee to vote for Milwaukee offices, or people who are not citizens of Milwaukee because they're not citizens of the country or whatever, that's Milwaukee's call, because federalism. But at the federal level, House, Senate, President, the SAVE Act passed the House. I don't know if it can pass the Senate. Right, they're going to need 60 in the Senate, and I don't know if they can peel off enough Democrats to make this happen. And that's where we are with this. Can non-citizens vote? No, not really. Why? Because the states don't let them.
Because the states don't.
Are there?
Yeah.
Are there certain places and certain elections in which non-citizens can vote? Yes, there are. Right. City boards, things like this, often let non-U.S. citizens vote. But it doesn't switch state houses. It doesn't give the president to one party or the other. You would call it statistical noise.
Right.
There's not enough there to make it relevant in any way, shape, or form. But as a matter of just pure constitutionality and the constitutional ethos that we've had these many years, I think it's fine to say political rights accrue to citizens, right? Natural rights belong to humans. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, these are human things. Voting is a political right. You don't get to just have that. You should have it wherever you're a citizen. That's an assertion I'll make all the time. But you shouldn't have it where you're not a citizen. Why would I be allowed to vote in Ireland? I mean, I have Irish heritage. It's idiotic for me to say that I should be voting in Ireland. If I go move to Ireland and stay there for a while, should I vote in Ireland then? Well, I mean, I have a vested interest, but I'm not an Irish citizen. And these are easy distinctions. And it's really up to the Irish whether they want to let me become a citizen or not. And I'm okay with that too. I wish people were much more liberal with their immigration policies, us included. But the people have the absolute right to determine who will and will not become a citizen. It's one of the reasons why elections actually do matter. And you see what I think is really unfortunate treatment right now of people who would very much like to be citizens and are being shown the door because a bunch of American citizens decided they don't want them around.
Civil is on a mission to host ideas that will lead humanity to an abundant future. Civil is a streaming platform with apps on TV and mobile. Watch shows, films, and debates and be part of an emerging community of people who believe we can innovate beyond our legacy systems built on coercion and zero-sum politics. Join Civil and let's build a new era of prosperity together. Learn more at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. You know, it's interesting because I'm listening to this conversation and it's reminding me of the conversation we had in the opening where I was asking you about the cabling that goes between your guitar and the amplifier, and your answer ended up being that the wiring in the speaker matters a heck of a lot more than the wiring between the thing and the guitar and the speaker, but that's the thing that people make a big deal about, but it doesn't matter. And that's all coming back to me as we have this conversation. And we make a big deal about, the ID and only citizens should vote and you're disenfranchised, all of that nonsense. And I would argue along the same lines, that's not where the action is. The action is in the fact that we've got two parties that lock up the debate, so that we can't have a third option show up on the stage. If you want to do something to reform the electoral process in the United States, that's where the action is. That's going to make a heck of a lot more difference than whether an extra group of people can vote.
But this is the fun part, right? Because now I would love it for the SAVE Act to pass. I would love it. Because now non-citizens are not voting, and in order to vote, you need this ID. What are we going to complain about next? Because it's going to be the next thing that steals elections when elections are not stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's going to be something else. It's always something else. The duopoly needs it to always be something else.
Right, because they don't want us looking at the real problem, which is that the Democratic and Republican parties have the whole thing locked up.
They're the problem. If a third party were able to displace one of the two and actually make inroads to the tune of 40% for a brief little while, things would change. And then that party would become part of the new duopoly.
Yeah, and in turn shut out another third party.
Because of course it would. This is why electoral politics, while important, and I've never said otherwise, is relatively hopeless. You'll get your way or your neighbor will get his way, but only if you're each choosing one of two ways.
So this conversation
good luck and God bless.
Goes a long way to explaining the business about the Supreme Court not stepping in gerrymandering cases, because how a state conducts its voting is up to the state.
And the gerrymander is the spoils of victory. If you win the state and your party is in power, it's your right to district that state any way you want. And other parties will fight you, but they won't win, because that's just one of the things you get to do. That's like saying, well, okay, you took a massive majority in the state, but you're not allowed to pass any laws. Why the hell not? If you win a majority in a state and you can get a redistricting going, which it typically happens after the census, but it doesn't have to. And now you're seeing it in the mid-census period, which is purely political. But so what? It's purely political. It's the same as when I say that impeachment is whatever the House of Representatives says it is. They could impeach somebody for being left-handed or having blue eyes. Right? They could literally do it for any reason. The same way that the winner of a state contest gets to redistrict that state. Well, okay.
And if you don't like it, go to your state government and go through the process to propose an amendment to the state constitution that prohibits it.
Yeah, you can't prohibit it, right? There's always going to be a problem with redistricting because people move and places grow and they require representation and other places shrink. It happens at the state level the same way it happens at the national level. And there will be interested parties in that system no matter what. Some states try to have a bipartisan commission. So what the hell you think that's going to work? When on earth has that ever worked? It's never going to work. There's always a fly in that ointment, and a deal will always be made. You guys can have these safe red districts. We'll take these safe blue districts, and we'll fight over these three. And whoever wins those three gets to run the place for 2 years. That's exactly the crap we pull at the federal level. Well, all right. And now we're going to have only citizens voting. What kind of jackass do you have to be against that? Do you really want non-Americans voting in American elections? What is your malfunction? Okay. And then you're going to have to prove you are who you say you are. That just doesn't seem to be all that horrible either. You can make the case that it's unnecessary, but I think the better case is that it's performative. And it's performative in exactly, it shows that you are in fact who you say you are. And I think that's an important thing to show. And it alleviates a lot of confusion at the polls for that matter. Now, how this is all going to play out in vote-in mailing, I have no idea. I have no idea. My guess is that when you register to vote, you're going to have to show an ID of some kind, and it'll follow you around electronically in some way. But I haven't read the full SAVE Act because you know how long these idiotic things are. And they bury the details that they don't want you to see in places they know you're never going to be looking. So we'll wait and see the totality of it.
It's nothing new. I can log on to Social Security's website, and I have to prove who I am, but it will show me my earnings history and their estimate of what I'll get from Social Security benefits when I retire. I had to identify myself remotely. We already do this with the federal government.
Yep. And here now at the end of this conversation, which I think we're at the end of this, aren't we?
Yeah.
At the end of this conversation, we have to get our leader and big toe Donald Trump back into the picture, because he says if this stalls in the Senate, maybe I'll have an executive order on voter ID. No, Donald Trump, no, you won't. Because you're not Congress. And only Congress has the right to overrule the states in how the states are doing their electoral business. That should be perfectly clear by the constitutional text that we read out loud earlier. I don't think Donald Trump has ever read the Constitution, and I don't think people in his orbit like to remind him of what it says. But this is his fallback position if it doesn't work in the Senate. And I don't know, man. I don't think this is going to work in the Senate. I really don't. It might, but boy, it's hard to imagine. And, if it doesn't work in the Senate, it's dead on arrival. It's just a stillbirth at that point. This will happen sooner or later. It's just probably not going to happen right now.
But it's a bad look for a party to be against this. I mean, it sends the signal that you believe, not only do you believe that there's illicit voting going on, but that you're benefiting from it.
Well, they don't, of course, put it in those terms. They're on the side of, they say, non-racism because it's racist, etc. Everything is always racist when you don't have a particularly compelling argument in the space. And look, our own fans come after us on this very point. Some of them are going to be very angered by things I have said today, and sorry. But if you're against the simple idea of only citizens voting and having to identify yourself with something as you do so, if you're against that, you really are saying, I think my side benefits from those things not happening. And I don't think any one side would benefit one way or the next. Because I'm on record as saying I don't think that we have rampant voter fraud. But this will prove it. And it'll shut people up, right? It will finally be done with these people.
But you phrase it as shutting people up, but it interests me in that it would bring back a perhaps needed sense of legitimacy to the elections. For everybody to say, yeah, well, look, I may not like who won, but legitimately he won.
There will still be people who will decline to believe the result of many elections. And those people, generally speaking, A, have no earthly idea what they're talking about, or B, are mentally ill, or C, both. And with either of those groups, there's literally nothing anybody can say that will make them see the light. So brush that aside. But there would be a lot of other people, and I think it would be quite a lot, who would say, I think our elections are more legitimate today than they've been in the past.
Right.
And that's never a bad thing. I mean, never. So why don't we just do that? Why don't we admit that that's not a bad thing to do? I don't understand why this is a particularly partisan issue, except that no matter what Donald Trump says, the Democrats will say that's an awful idea. I remind our Democrat friends, and we have a lot of them, you can hate Donald Trump and still think he had a particularly good idea. Ideas and people are not linked at the hip. Maybe when the Democrats take over, all the Republicans will decide then that they don't want IDs or citizenship requirements. It would be just like them. That would be exactly what I would expect.
We've always been at war with Eurasia.
We have always been at war with Eurasia. That is exactly right. And on that happy note, I know you're all going to send me all kinds of bitchy email, and you ought not. But if you must, you must. And if you do, Anthony will read every word. Me?
Words and Numbers Podcast at gmail.com.
There you go. So he loves getting the hate mail, so send it to him. He responds to almost all of it, too, or at least did up until recently.
I do. I got behind. I made the mistake of traveling for a couple of weeks. I got behind, and now it's just snowballed, and now I'm afraid to look.
That's like the 25,000 unread emails in my inbox.
Yeah.
Something tells me I'm never going to see what those said. I'm just saying. But anyway, I will do my due diligence. I will do the thing I'm supposed to do here. And I will remind you all to be nice to each other in these trying times.
At Words and Numbers, we spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and the government, but fundamentally all of this boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of respect. The people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner. We at Civil are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately engage civilly with each other. If you share this idea, please join us by subscribing at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
For those of you who are still here, I've got a story for you. I've told it before, or I don't know if I've ever...
Time out. Are you going to use profanity?
I don't think so. Yeah, probably. Probably. But
okay,
we'll see.
James is about to use profanity, so those of you with young children and teenagers...
Only maybe. Have I ever told the story of the push to get the residents of the group home I worked at to vote? Have I ever told that story on the podcast?
I recall that happened. I don't know the details of the story.
All right. Well, if I did tell it on the podcast, it's so long ago you can't remember, which means a bunch of our listeners will never have heard it. So here we go. I used to work in group homes and mental institutions. You can all have a good laugh at my expense right now. And I was often hired, as a matter of fact, I was always hired in those places because I was a big, scary man. And this was primarily a woman's field. So I ended up working everywhere that had real violence. And when I say real violence, I mean the kind where the bone comes sticking out of the skin after the attack, right? This kind of violence. But somehow, Ant, in the course of things, I ended up at this beautiful home in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And it was just gorgeous, nicer than any house I'll ever be able to afford. And there were 6 people there, and they were all geriatric cases. I wasn't going to get my ass kicked in this place in 100 years, right? It's just, and I would go there, and this is when I was working third shift, so I could take classes during the day. I would work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, nights, and then I would take 21, 24 hours of credit during the day on campus, which was like an hour and a half from where I was working. So you can imagine the gruesome nature of my life for a few years when I did this. Anyway, some guy, I'm going to call him, I don't want to use his name. He's such an idiot. It wouldn't be fair. I'm just going to call him the jackass. The jackass from administration came over and handed me a bunch of papers and said, we got to get everybody registered to vote. And I said, come again? He said, the residents, they all have to vote. And I said, we don't let them cross the street. 5 of the 6 of them are nonverbal. Let's do an experiment real fast. And I gathered them with the jackass with me. And I said, who's the president right now? And everybody looked at me like a deer would look at a tree. And one person, one woman said, is it Roosevelt? So she was in the right ballpark. Calendar problem of epic proportion. Right. But they, right ballpark. And I said, you still want to do this? And he says, we have to. It's their constitutional right. And I said, oh, now I understand. We have to. It's their constitutional right. I would like to go get them all gun permits. They all have the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. And he said, no, we're not doing that. And I said, you're right. We don't have to do that. If you don't want to carry a gun outside, you could just buy it and bring it and leave it in your house. So I'll take care of that. He was still very much against this and couldn't tell me why we would differ on the necessity of the First Amendment versus the Second. And I said, I'm not touching any of this. This is the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. Shame on you. And then I left. Because when you work third shift, you don't have to see administration very much. And I just went on with my day, and I never thought about it again. And then election day came in, and I took a few hours early because I could add extra hours on. And the League of Women Voters showed up with absentee ballots and went to all these people, 5 nonverbal people, and said, "And who will you be voting for?" And then they intuited the correct answers.
And surprisingly, all 5 of the residents voted for the same party?
6 voted for Bill Clinton. 2 voted for a third party. So shockingly, there were no Republican votes cast at the House.
Right.
Who would have predicted such a thing? Who could have predicted? So when you think to yourself, oh, every vote is sacred, well, maybe, but maybe again not. And I swear to God, this story happened. I am not making this up. This happened. It happened in Hartford, Connecticut, when I worked for the Hartford Association of Retarded Citizens. You know how I like telling people who did what? You know what's never happened yet? When I tell people who did what, I've never been sued. Isn't that something? These people did exactly what I just told you they did, and shame on all of them for doing it. Some people ought not vote. How you could not see that is baffling to me. But here we are.
Good story.
Yeah, not a bad one. I'll try to think of something a little more uplifting next time, at which time I will see you again, which is always a nice part of my day. So see you next time, and hope everything goes well.
See you next time, James.